Okay, one moment while I get confirmation from. Appreciate everybody's patience. Okay, we are live.
All right, thank you, Barbara. Let's officially call to order the meeting of the Clean Energy Alliance Advisory Committee. We're glad you're all here. And Susan, can we ask you to call the roll so we have a clear record of who's here?
Certainly. Member Kraus?
Here.
Member Shade?
Here.
Member Sweedler? Member DeCina? Member Haydu? Vice Chair Mosier?
Here.
Chair Warden?
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Barbara, if there's any preliminary business, now would be a good time. If not, I'm going to just turn it over to you for the presentations.
I think we need our flag salute, Chair.
Okay. Who would like to lead us in that? How about you, Dan King? You look like you were ready to do it.
Absolutely, Chair. All right. Are you ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dan. Very nicely done. All right, Barbara, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair Warden. So I'm happy to announce that we actually have 3 guest speakers to assist us with our presentation to the Community Advisory Committee at today's meeting. As you know, one of the key tasks that the board had identified for the Community Advisory Committee is to track progress being met towards each individual member's climate action plans. And a key goal or a key purpose of Clean Energy Alliance when we were formed, and as stated in our joint powers agreement, is to assist our member agencies with meeting their climate action plan goals. And so to lay a groundwork for the committee in order to start thinking about how we're going to accomplish that, I thought it would be good to hear from each of the member agencies to provide an overview of their climate action plans, what their goals are as stated in the climate action plans, and then initiatives that have been identified to help them towards those goals. And so I'd like to introduce first Dan King. He's the Assistant City Manager from the City of Solana Beach, and he'll be presenting Solana Beach's climate action plan. And then we have Clem Brown, and he's the Sustainability and Special Projects Director, Administrator.
It's a long
And then
time.
we have,
Close enough.
and then from the City of Del Mar. And then we have Mike Grimm from the City of Carlsbad, and he's got a really big smile on his face because he is a short-term employee. He is the City of Carlsbad's environmental director, manager, and had been mainly responsible for their climate action plan. And it is actually going to be revised here in the upcoming months, but it's still beneficial to understand where they're starting from. So I'm going to start to share my screen, and Dan's going to kick it off with talking about the City of Solana Beach and their climate action plan goals. When we're finished hearing from the 3 member agencies, we'll spend a few minutes talking about how this fits with what the Climate Action Committee the Community Advisory Committee is working on, and how we can move forward in thinking about initiatives that Clean Energy Alliance can be thinking about, and formulating a recommendation for the board for their consideration for our next upcoming budget. So with that.
Great. Let's just note for the record that Paige Decino has joined us. Welcome.
And can everyone see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. And Dan, it's to you.
Great. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you to the Community Advisory Committee for inviting us all here for this joint presentation on all of our respective CAPs. As Barbara mentioned, my name is Dan King. I am the Assistant City Manager for the City of Solana Beach. And I was involved in the development of our climate action plan, as well as the development and implementation of Solana Energy Alliance. So this is right up my alley, and I really appreciate talking about these things. So again, thank you for inviting us here. So for the City of Solana Beach, our climate action plan was adopted in July of 2017. However, it was using data from 2010. Unfortunately, that was the latest year that all of the data was available to run the program to develop the climate action plan. At that point, all the cities, or most of the cities, were working on developing their first climate action plans. And so the data, standardization of the data was just getting up to speed between the water usage with SANDAG and the vehicle miles traveled, electricity use with SDG&E. So for our first climate action plan, it was based off of the 2010 numbers. So for those numbers in Solana Beach, we had 139,216 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent for the city. And that's broken up into 5 different sectors. The first one being transportation, and I'm sure you've heard by now, most of the GHG emissions in all communities come from transportation. Number 2 is electricity, then natural gas, solid waste, and water consumption rounds it out. Next slide. So based on those numbers and in line with the state's aggressive greenhouse gas reduction goals, specifically AB 32, the city's CAP established these following reduction targets: 15% below the 2010 emissions by 2020, and 50% below the 2010 emissions by 2035. So in the CAP, there are 4 basic strategies for mitigation measures to reach or exceed those emission caps. Those strategies are transportation, electricity and natural gas, waste and water measures, and carbon sequestration. Now, there technically is a 5th strategy, which is legislative reductions, but those are kind of out of the realm of what local governments can do, and those rely on the state and federal regulations to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So in those strategies, in the first one in transportation for Solana Beach, there was 11 different measures identified with a total potential greenhouse gas reduction of 19,632 metric tons. In the second strategy, there were 8 different measures identified with a potential estimated reduction of 21,000 metric tons. In the water and waste measures, there are 5 different measures with those estimated reductions of 4,184. And for carbon sequestration, there was just 1 measure with a potential reduction of 986 metric tons. Next slide. So within those categories, the top 5 measures for Solana Beach in potential reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, the first one being measure T1, and T is for transportation. And that would be increasing electric vehicles and alternative fuel vehicles in the region with a potential reduction of about 17,500 metric tons. The second most impactful measure would be measure E1 for electricity, which would be implementing the community choice aggregation. And for Solana Beach, as I'm sure you're all aware, we have successfully completed that one with the rollout of our Solana Energy Alliance, and now Del Mar and and Carlsbad can claim the same as well. So that's a great accomplishment. For measure E2 on electricity is installing 10.8 megawatts of residential rooftop solar. Measure W1 for waste would be diverting 90% of the solid waste from landfills. And the last measure, E4, is installing solar hot water heaters. Now, as you can see, this cap is already out of date, as the common best practice now is not solar hot water heaters, but actually heat pumps. And so, as you can see, these caps need to be updated frequently to update the measures and the goals. Next slide.
Can I ask a question, Dan?
Sure.
Did your cap identify like a timeline or key, a time frame for implementing or goals per year for each of these measures? Or
yes, that's a good question. So in the climate action plan itself, it just has the measures, but then subsequently to that, about I would say 8 to 10 months later, the city also adopted an implementation plan which addresses or identifies specific actions that can be taken to accomplish the measures that are identified in the CAP. And so in the implementation plan, it's identified as short-term, long-term, and ongoing implementation of the measures. And so in that plan, you can kind of identify, and that's used as kind of the roadmap for our Climate Action Commission to take a look at to see, okay, well, here are the short-term goals. Let's start working on these. Here are the most impactful measures that can be done, at minimal cost, and really kind of picking and choosing which ones to attack. Now, we had a good benefit of starting the Salon Energy Alliance early, and so I think it's the next slide actually might show that well. It did a lot to further our progress with the Climate Action Plan to help start reaching these goals. So in this chart, based when the Climate Action Plan was completed and adopted, our emissions, you can see on the left-hand side on that chart, were exceeding our 2020 target. Back in, I would say, I think it was 2 years ago, we had a minor update, not an extensive update to the CAP, which we're anticipating to do the next in calendar year 2022. But we did update it because we asked EPIC to, that's the Energy Policy Initiative Center, to run the numbers again with our Salon Energy Alliance, with our CCA, to show kind of those impacts. And so the 2016 emissions, this was just prior to Salon Energy Alliance going live. You can see that with the measures that we had implemented from 2010 to 2016, a lot of this being as a result of the state and federal programs, which reduce greenhouse gas emissions nationwide, our emissions were reduced below the 2020 target. And then the final bar over there, the 2019 estimate, was post the launch of the Salon Energy Alliance. And so you can see the impact that had to further reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. Unfortunately, we still have work to do. As you can see, moving into 2035, we're not quite there yet. And so we need to identify additional measures to help us reach that target. Next slide. So as I just mentioned, the city is anticipating doing a comprehensive update of our climate action plan in calendar year 2022, in identifying future measures to help us hopefully get to reaching or exceeding our 2035 goals. Obviously, the number one sector is in transportation, and so anything we can do to increase EV infrastructure, reduce the vehicle miles traveled would be a great benefit. Grid resiliency, obviously with the proliferation of solar, we want to make sure that the grid is stable. Battery storage, increasing renewable energy sources, improving energy and efficiency in existing and new buildings, which we're looking at now with the potential electrification ordinance coming, which touches on the electrifying buildings final bullet point. And so these are kind of the top measures we've identified as the next logical ones. And if Clean Energy Alliance can assist with any of these, that would be much appreciated. And we look forward to continuing that dialogue. And that's it for me. And I think we're moving on to Clem.
Yeah, before we move on, we do have a question from our member Shade.
I'm happy to wait till the end. I don't know what's the best format. Is it better to ask him? I'm happy to wait till the end.
Let's do them now because we'll forget the Solana Beach stuff after we hear
Okay.
the other cities.
Okay, thank you. So real quick, I'm just curious, without updated numbers, you're going to add more initiatives, but you really don't know the effectiveness of the issue, the initiatives you have in place. And just one note, electric vehicles, I mean, Tesla really changed the market, and that happened after 16, and all my neighbors have Teslas, and they're very, a choice automobile in the Solana Beach area. Another is solar. Most people that are doing any kind of touching or remodeling or are using rebate, which is a local and federal program, using that rebate. So I'm just wondering, throwing on, and I'm only saying this because I've been talking to people in our city. Their concern is, the restrictions that keep coming. Before we add additional restrictions, will you be looking at what the real numbers are now that we have the Energy Alliance in place and all the other pieces?
Yes, that great questions. As part of the process of updating CAP. So what happened initially back in 2017, a majority of the cities in the county all kind of developed their first climate action plan, right? So as part of that process, EPIC, the group that I mentioned, the Energy Policy Initiative Center out of University of San Diego, they have a kind of proprietary tool that they use that basically develops greenhouse gas emission inventories for all the cities. And what was good was when they updated that, when I mentioned in the 2017 numbers, they did it for the entire region with the goal of trying to standardize how these numbers are being calculated and make sure that all the cities are kind of on the same playing field in calculating these numbers. And so EPIC is once again doing that for all of the cities for the next year in 2022 when whatever cities are updating their cap. So their tool is able to look at the current numbers now because of these systems that have been set up with SANDAG and with SDG&E and with most of the water agencies. That data that we need is all being captured, and that started to be captured from 2016 or so on. And so we'll have all that information. They'll be able to run the current numbers. And so we'll have the inventories first, and then we can develop the mitigation measures and how we're going to move forward. And so, yes, great question. And those will be taken into account.
Thank you, Dan. Anybody else on the advisory committee have a question? If not, Dan, I had a couple.
Sure.
One, is your cap aspirational or is it integrated into your development review process? If somebody applies for a development permit, does it get tested against the cap or not?
It does not. So we have, it's not I guess qualified cap is the term to use. And so it's non-binding, not legally binding. It's an aspirational cap, and it's not part of our general plan or mitigation for our general plan.
Okay, thanks. The other question I have is for the other presenter, just keep in mind, in light of the recent International Protocol on Climate Change big report and the red flag warning from the head of the UN and all of that, are you planning to accelerate your programs or in some way adapt to the more dire warning that we've all gotten?
Yeah, another great question. As I'm sure you're aware, our Climate Action Commission is very active, much like they are in Del Mar and Carlsbad as well. They are pushing programs, bigger programs, faster programs to the city. We just did last night actually pass a resolution in support of the Net Energy Metering 3.0 program at the PUC. We're looking at building electrification coming back to council on the 22nd. And so they're really pushing the envelope, which is great from the staff level anyway, to really start accelerating what we're doing. Even though our cap isn't qualified or isn't a legally binding document, they're really kind of keeping us in line and making sure that we're being very aggressive with our measures. And so, our council's been very responsive to this. I think our community has been very responsive to this. And so, we are extremely active in that front.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, Paige, I see you got your hand up.
Yeah, I just have a quick question follow up on yours, which was, is there any plan for Solana Beach to get their CAP certified in the future, near future?
So there's been discussions at the Climate Action Commission level. I think there's, from a city's perspective, there are, I guess, pros and cons to that. You know, it does potentially expose the city to legal, repercussions that if we were to do a qualified cap. And so I think the perspective now is, hey, we are well ahead of the pace. We are very active in implementing our programs. Things are kind of working now, and the discussion is, do we really want to potentially open that up for, potential liability on the city side if we do make it qualified, or are we doing enough to meet all of our goals without having to do that? So that's the discussion that's currently happening right now. The Climate Action Commission proposed making it a legally enforceable cap during our council work plan process, and our council decided to kind of put that on the unprioritized section of the cap and not necessarily priority items, so that it stays kind of in the discussion, but it's not one of our priorities right now.
Thank you, Dan. And we all owe a big thanks to Solana Beach for kickstarting this whole effort in North County with Solana Energy Alliance. They were the pioneers that went out on their own and seem very committed to moving us forward. So Barbara, back to you to introduce our next speaker.
Yep. So next, we're going to hear from Clem Brown on City of Del Mar's Climate Action Plan.
Good afternoon, Community Advisory Board members. My name is Clem Brown. I'm the City of Del Mar's Environmental Sustainability and Special Projects Manager. I do a lot of different things at Del Mar, but one of the things I'm most proud of is overseeing implementation of our Climate Action Plan. And it's really fortuitous that we have two founding fathers of our Climate Action Plan also on the call, our Deputy Mayor Warden and our Climate Action Plan volunteer facilitator, Don Mosier. They were instrumental in actually developing our CAP, which I wasn't around. I wasn't with the City of Del Mar at that time, but I've picked it up and been working on it since I joined in 2017, with most recently developing a more robust implementation plan in our first CAP monitoring plan back in 2019. But before I go into that, I kind of want to step back and, like Dan did, give an overview of our CAP for the other board members. Del Mar adopted its Climate Action Plan in June of 2016, so we just beat Solana Beach. Yay, put one in our column. As far as our baseline greenhouse gas emissions inventory that we use to calibrate our reduction targets, we use data from 2012. And so what you can see here is that for the City of Del Mar, which is the smallest city in San Diego County, our total community-wide greenhouse gas emissions from that baseline 2012 year was 55,855 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. So that gives you a kind of a comparison to Solana Beach, this number, and you'll see the City of Carlsbad's number being a larger city, what that looks like. As far as how that number breaks down to the various sectors, very similar to Solana Beach, and no surprise that transportation, which is really driven by the vehicle miles traveled both in Del Mar and people coming to Del Mar with fuel combustion vehicles, is by far the leading factor in our emissions, which is then followed by electricity use, and that's both residential energy use and commercial, industrial, and lighting. And then a much smaller share of the pie of our emissions come from our solid waste sector, water consumption, and our wastewater system, as you can see in this pie chart. So again, this is our baseline. This was our starting point using 2012 data. Next slide, please. So using that baseline data and also factoring, as Dan mentioned, the anticipated reductions that Del Mar would benefit from by local, regional, and state climate action plan efforts, we set our greenhouse gas reduction targets to be 15% below that 2012 baseline by the year 2020, and 50% reductions below the baseline year by 2035. Our climate action plan also includes a renewable energy goal of having the city be powered by 50% renewable energy by 2020 and 100% renewable energy by 2035. I'd like to pause here and thank the Clean Energy Alliance for helping us to already achieve that 50% by 2020. We didn't meet it by 2020, but we were very close with the launch of the Clean Energy Alliance and the city of Del Mar selecting the Clean Impact Plus, which is the 50% renewable, 75% carbon-free base energy product for all of our electricity accounts. And then further action and leadership by our city council to upgrade our municipal accounts to the Green Impact, which is the 100% renewable energy. So we're really proud of that. And we really want to thank CEA for helping us to achieve that goal early. Next slide, Barbara. Oh, and that's just a picture. If you're not familiar with our new Civic Center or newish Civic Center, that's kind of a drone picture of it. And we like to show off our photovoltaic array that we have on the building roof. There's also battery storage in the subterranean parking garage that helps power our very long city council meetings in the evening. If we have time, I'm sure Dr. Don Mosier would like to talk a little bit more. He was actually instrumental in getting us a grant from the California, was it the CEC grant, Don, I believe, that to actually fund the installation and doing the assessment and monitoring of its performance. And Don can speak at length about how that system is performing and the benefit that it's providing to Del Mar. Okay, let's move on to the next slide, Barbara.
Chair Warden, would you like to take questions now? I do see a hand.
Let's see if anybody has a question for Clem. And Paige, I see your hand is still up, but if you have another question, that's fine. Anybody else have a question? And I'll include the staffers from the other entities. If you have a question you want to ask, please feel free. We're informal here.
Okay.
Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. And I'm supposed to know this stuff, so I'm not going to show ignorance by asking questions about things I'm supposed to know. But seriously, I'm pretty familiar with our climate action plan and the great work Clem does. All right.
Okay, so this slide kind of gives us a snapshot in time of our current progress on achieving our CAP targets. And so there's a lot on here, so let me walk through it. If you look at the bar chart in the upper right, this came from our first ever formally published Climate Action Plan Monitoring Report. I had the pleasure of working with an excellent Civic Spark program fellow that just did a great job pulling this information together. But what it shows you, if you look at the bottom bar going up, kind of that's that 2012 baseline. That was our starting point as far as what the city's emissions were. And then shows you the 2020 target. That is what we had to reduce them by to achieve that 15% reduction by 2020. We needed to get that number down to 47,477 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. What we were able to achieve with our current emissions, and again, this is using this is using 2016 data, that we were already meeting that 2020 target based on our 2016 GHG inventory data that we received from Sandag. And so that's great. We benefited a lot from the aggressive climate action from the state and from Sandag, the efforts that they're doing. We benefited from that, but we have also done local measures in Del Mar. And then you can see what our 2035 target is that we're striving for. And that's that 50% reduction of getting it down to about just under 28,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. And then this pie chart is very similar to the first one I showed, which was the 2012 baseline. The the percentages of the pie haven't changed a whole lot from the different sectors, and that's to be expected. But this is a more up-to-date numbers and kind of where we are now. Next slide, Barbara. So I think Dan had a very similar slide. Our climate action plan uses slightly different terminology. We have, within the CAP, we have 22 goals that we categorize in 4 sectors. And these are the 4 sectors that we organize our goals and our mitigation strategies to achieve those goals. We have a sector for energy and buildings that includes 7 strategies. And I won't read the numbers here, but you can read them on the screen of what the cumulative metric tons of CO2 equivalent reductions would be if we fully implemented all 7 of those strategies under the energy and building sector. Then we have water and waste strategies. We have 5 of those. For transportation, we have 9 strategies that have the most significant reduction potential under our CAP. And then we have 1 strategy that's related to urban tree planting or carbon sequestration. I want to also add that I think it was in 2018 that Don Mosier really kind of spearheaded and led the charge on doing a kind of a mini update to our CAP to include a social equity chapter. Our original CAP didn't have that. And so Don was able to get City Council to update our CAP to include a chapter on social equity strategies. So we have 8 of those. And then I mentioned that, when you add up all of these strategies and all the reduction potential, it doesn't achieve our full reduction requirements. And that's because, again, we are getting the benefit and the credit from action that the state and the region is also taking to address climate change and GHG reductions. So when you include those, that gets us over the bar and where we're trying to go by 2035. Next slide. I think I have one more. So for this presentation and for the board's benefit, I was trying to think of what strategies that we have in our climate action plan that would have a nexus to the Clean Energy Alliance and that we could potentially look for partnership or assistance in achieving. And so I pulled these out and wanted to walk through them. Goal 7 in our CAP is related to renewable energy supply. Again, I talked about this, about how we have this goal of getting to 100% renewable energy for the entire city by 2035. Our city council and our sustainability advisory board, which is our citizen appointed advisory committee that advises the city council on environmental and sustainability issues, were really strongly advocated that the city prioritize forming or joining a community choice aggregation program as our most key important strategy because of the potential reductions benefits. So we're just thrilled to be able to have executed on that and be a partner of the Clean Energy Alliance to help achieve that goal. Goals 1 and 2 in our energy and building sector relate to residential and non-residential PV systems. We have goals to install 2 megawatts of PV by 2020 and 2.5 megawatts of PV by 2035. So that could be an opportunity of a program with CEA that could help proliferate more rooftop solar systems in Del Mar, maybe coupled with battery storage. Goal 3 is related to energy efficiency retrofits, primarily for residential. We also have goals in our CAP for multifamily properties and businesses, but I pulled this one out because we have a goal of getting to 30% reduction in energy use in 20% of our homes by 2035. So we would be looking for opportunities to partner on programs that can help do more energy efficiency retrofit projects. And then goal 16, which I think probably would have the most benefit beyond what we've derived from joining the Clean Energy Alliance, is increasing the vehicle miles traveled in Del Mar and to Del Mar by electric vehicles as opposed to fuel combustion vehicles, because of just the how much that sector drives our emissions. And so we have a goal of getting to 30% of those VNTs are by electric clean vehicles by 2035. So as Dan talked about, more EV infrastructure is needed to kind of spur that transition to electric vehicles. So I want to conclude before we stop for questions with a caveat that I did not have a slide for what our next steps are and kind of our work plan. And I wanted to talk about that real quick. I mentioned we have a sustainability advisory board. They really set our staff or council's work plan for what measures in our CAP we're going to be working on next. And unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, they've been dormant for the last 18 months. And so we haven't been able to have discussions with them about what they want to focus on moving forward. I'm very much looking forward to that group coming back online so that we can dust off our CAP. We know we need to do an update. It's over 5 years old now. A lot of these strategies need to be updated. We need to prioritize our work plan and figure out with what limited resources we have, what the city of Del Mar is going to focus on next. And so I think with that, I am done, and I will be happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Thank you, Clem. Deborah, your hand is up. Why don't you go first?
Okay, I guess you piqued my interest on your social equity strategies, your 8 social equity strategies. I'm wondering if you could just give me an idea of what they are, and then are they quantifiable, like in terms of your reduction, or is it just access to reduction? Like for instance, some sort of strategy, for solar, financing, I don't know, other options like that. I'm just really curious about that part of your plan.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'm actually not the best person to answer that, but you are correct. I mean, they're really strategies that are difficult to quantify, but they're really about making sure that as Del Mar implements its climate action plan, it is implementing strategies that provide equitable benefits to all socioeconomic groups within the city of Del Mar. And then Don, did you, you were kind of the author of that section. Would you like to speak to it? Maybe you can provide a little bit more detail and background for Deborah.
Sure. There were 2 key components to that. One was seeking funds to subsidize solar and other energy improvements for low-income individuals. And that would be seeking both city funds, outside funds, and particularly funds, particularly from the CEA, potentially once they're in profit mode. The second one was workforce equity, and it was really partnering with local unions and solar installers to train low-income individuals and help the transition of the workforce from gas and petroleum products and other industries into solar installation. So it had a big component based on that training, and there are partners that the city could work with to implement those training opportunities. So those were the big measures in social equity. It's really providing resources for low-income individuals and providing more training to help the transition to a greener economy.
So did you, Don, since I've got you on the floor, did you talk about that opt-down? In other words, low-income families would be able to access cleaner energy, through some sort of subsidized program of the CEA. And also, what about the retrofitting to their dwelling, their house? Were there programs for those as well?
There were the opt-down programs, the low-income programs that were legacy programs from SDG&E are continued in CEA. So those subsidy programs are continued for upgrades. We did a study financed by SDG&E for low-income aged individuals on what home upgrades they would be interested in doing and what the obstacles to outreach were. And that was a very interesting study. And we found that many of our older homes are inhabited by older residents who are not so interested in doing major upgrades because they think they're not going to be around long enough to take benefits of those upgrades. So that presents a real communication challenge for that subset of individuals.
Thanks, Don. Don, you had your hand up and probably wanted to say something else. So since you got the floor, go ahead.
Sure. I just wanted to quickly upgrade how our Civic Center solar system is doing. It went live in October of 2018. I'm on the Solar Edge monitoring program. So to date, it's generated 306 megawatt hours of energy. The savings in CO greenhouse gas emissions has been over 215 metric tons. That's an equivalent savings to getting 47 gas-powered Suburbans off the street, to put it in more simpler terms. And the savings in energy costs would be predicted to be about $37,000 based on an average cost of about 12 cents a kilowatt hour for the city. So this has been a good investment for the city. The statistics have been somewhat distorted by the COVID epidemic, which has lowered the occupancy of the city hall. So if we'd been at full use, we probably would have saved a lot more because we would have offset the 4 to 9 p.m. Top tier time of use rates. So the pandemic has upset a lot of statistics and a lot of our lives, but this solar system kept operating and generating electricity throughout.
Thank you very much, Don. Paige, you're up next.
Yeah, okay. I was curious, I know Solana Beach and Del Mar, most of their transportation measures are directed at EVs, as is Carlsbad. And I'm just curious about if they have any plans, either city, to address transportation for lower income folks that probably aren't going to buy an EV.
Let's give Dan and Clem both a shot at that. Dan, you want to take it first? I don't see Dan, but I hope he's still with us.
Maybe Dan had to leave. I think he had a conflict and had to leave early, so I'm by myself on this one.
All right, Dan, it's all yours.
And I've just joined coming late because I had unfortunate. I had to take care of something. It's Al Sweet.
Can you guys hear me now? Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
That sounds like Al Sweedler.
It does. Yeah.
All right, Al, welcome.
I joined late. Sorry.
We'll note you're here.
Yep. And I think we do have Dan on the line.
Okay, Dan, if you're there and heard the question, give it a crack at a response.
Sure, and I apologize. I'm in my car now. I had to go pick up my kids from school. But yeah, so as far as the lower income aspect of these, I mean, I think our hope was with Solana Energy Alliance, at least initially, and then now with Clean Energy Alliance, is at some point we could get to a point where, you know, we're creating some revenue for some local programs, and that much like what Sonoma Clean Power has done, is develop a rebate program for the purchase of EV vehicles. And it's my understanding, and Barbara may have more information on this though, is that there was certain amount of that money that was earmarked for lower income communities. And I think that would be something that we'd be interested in if we get to that point of having that excess revenue to be able to specifically help those to purchase electron EV vehicles.
All right, thanks, Dan. Clem, you want to give it a shot?
Yeah, so we do have, out of the 11 strategies we have related to the transportation sector in Del Mar, some are related to getting more people to purchase and drive EVs, but we have other strategies as well. Some of them are a bit outdated and need to be updated, but I know off the top of my head that we have several strategies related to mode shift and getting all individuals out of cars and into other forms of transportation and facilitating that, whether that be through bike share programs, building more bike infrastructure to get people to ride their bikes instead of getting in their cars. We have a strategy related to promoting and trying to incentivize van pooling, carpooling, telecommuting, things that just reduce vehicle miles traveled, no matter what type of car you use altogether. I would argue that those would benefit all socioeconomic groups, but we do have those in our climate action plan.
Thanks, Clem. Okay, Seth, you've been patiently waiting. You have a question?
Yeah, I do. Actually, two or three. It has to do with the high volume consumers like hotels or, the racetrack. And I know, for example, with the racetrack, I'm assuming that with COVID, their utilization is a lot lower than what is normally seen by them. Are they part of a subscriber to the CEA, or are they still purchasing from SDG&E? And, what are the implications of the reduced usage?
Let's ask Barbara to answer that. I think I know the answer, but to make sure we get it right. Barbara?
Yeah. So the fairgrounds is what's known as direct access. So they take their energy from another provider, but they could in the future decide to become a Clean Energy Alliance customer, and we're certainly interested in serving their needs. Chair Warden, if I could interrupt here for a moment, I think our guest speaker from Carlsbad had some limited time, and I want to confirm with Mike. Okay, he says we're fine.
We're fine. Okay, well, Mike, raise your hand if we're going to cut you short on time, because we definitely want to hear from you and we can postpone questions. But if we're okay, then Seth, you had other questions?
Well, basically, I wanted to know, with COVID, what is the reduction in utilization, and how does that contribute to the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and so forth? And when they come back online, hopefully after COVID is no longer the scourge that it is, how much more power are they going to be consuming?
Barbara, maybe you should take that if that's a generic question. And if it's specific to the fairgrounds, we can ask Don. Yeah,
so just with regards in general, and I can speak to what we saw in Solana Beach. While there was a reduction in the commercial side of electricity usage, we saw an increase in residential usage because now people were home and they were working from home and using electricity from their home. So in the case of Solana Beach, they didn't see an overall large reduction in usage because it was a shift in usage. We don't know, Carlsbad and Del Mar, they were being served by San Diego Gas and Electric during the period of COVID. And so we're in a little bit more normalized, not fully normalized, but a little more normalized times right now. And we have to wait to get some history and then be able to look back. But the comparison will be challenging because we won't know what would be considered normal for those cities at this point.
Thanks for that. Seth, do you have another question? And I want to give Don a chance if he wanted to comment on that one about the fairgrounds. You don't have to, Don, but if you'd like to say something.
Yeah, I do. The fairgrounds, as Barbara said, is a direct access customer. We'd love to join CEA after we build our new solar array, and that's project is currently on hold, but we do intend to go out again with a request for proposal to build a 30 megawatt solar system with storage to meet our needs during fair events and big events, and to export energy at other times. I do also want to say that while our usage went down because of reduced crowds during the COVID epidemic, we had to renegotiate our direct access contracts, and the cost of energy went up more than doubled from our direct access provider. So there was no, even though our energy use went down by half, our costs went up by double. And so it's a net zero change because of the pandemic.
Wow. Thanks for that, Don. Seth, did you have another question?
No, thank you very much. I did have another question, but that's for down the road, actually.
Okay, don't forget it. All right, Deborah, let's go back to you.
I just wanted to quickly make a comment of how I'm just really proud of the work that Del Mar did in the social equity strategies. I think one of the areas that we need to address, countywide is looking at our lower SES communities and how do we bring them in to be part of our goals and part of our, work to provide the, meet our climate action goals. So I just really wanted to make that comment because I just think it was really forward thinking for Del Mar to do that. And I'm hoping we'll see more of that in our other cities.
Thanks for that, Deborah. And thanks to Don, who really drove that boat for us. And just a note, a lot of people think of Del Mar and Solana Beach and Carlsbad as wealthy communities that don't have people of low economic income, but that's not true. Del Mar, last time I looked, I think we were around 20% of our population was at the low income level. And that's because we have a lot of seniors who may be living in on a piece of ground that's quite valuable, but they're living on retirement or Social Security income, and they don't have a lot of income. All right, Paige, did you have your hand up? I don't see you. Yeah, go ahead.
I had a quick question for Don and Barbara about the fairgrounds. If the cost of their direct access energy doubled, is that going to be incentivize them to join CEA?
We'll see. It went from 3 cents a kilowatt hour to 6 cents a kilowatt hour. So that 6 cents a kilowatt hour is still not that high.
All right. Any more questions for Del Mar? If not, let's hear Mike Grimm for Carlsbad. Unless Barbara, unless you wanted to say something.
Nope, you did it for me. Just introduce Mike.
All right, Mike, we're glad to have you here, and kind of sorry to hear you're riding off into the sunset, but you've earned it.
Well, thank you very much, and I want to thank all of you for sticking with me here. I ended up getting triple booked today, so I'm literally remote working, i.e., I am in the remote corner of a parking lot. I couldn't get back to the office in time to have the presentation. So hopefully my connections will stay stable. If not, just wave and I'll finish up or fill in whatever. And also thank you, Barbara, for talking about the time. I just texted the folks. As you noted, I'm going to be gone in a month, and in a month they're not going to have me in the meetings, so they should just start getting used to it. So anyway, thank you all for allowing us to present, and also thank you for all the really important work you're doing. I'm personally very happy, and I think Carlsbad's very happy that Clean Energy Alliance happened, and it's going to be a game changer in so many ways. So the city of Carlsbad, I'll just do a little bit of background, similar format to Don and Clem there. Dan and Clem, sorry. The Carlsbad's CAP was originally adopted with our general plan update in 2015. It was based on the 2005 baseline, which was one of those early baselines that a lot of jurisdictions did in coordination with SANDAG. And then we've done a lot of the implementation already. Probably the largest lift that our CAP had in it from a single project perspective was writing a bunch of building codes, also known as REACH codes, that dealt with energy efficiency, renewable energy, electric vehicle charging infrastructure, getting the decarbonizing water, heating, and then also transportation demand management. And that went a long way to addressing some of the impacts of our future development, because all of those future developments would be subject to those building codes. Another focus we had was on electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and we could talk a little bit more about how that strategy is proceeding and implementing. So in about 2019, and let me back up one second. We did do a qualified cap. That was actually one of the selling points to folks may not have been too excited about climate action planning was that if we were a qualified cap, that would streamline the GHG analysis needed for both public and private developments and make it a more programmatic approach. So in about 2019, we started looking again at our 2005 baseline, SANDAGs. I think Dan mentioned the SANDAG recap snapshots. So when SANDAG started doing the inventories for each of the jurisdictions in a more standardized way, we looked at that for our 2005 inventory. We started looking at it and we realized that our calculations for transportation emissions were off. And to be a qualified cap, you have to have an accurate inventory. You have to show that your measures are going to meet your targets and everything has to be up to snuff. So that caused us to do a very quick cap update in 2020. We were hoping to do a comprehensive cap update at the same time, but unfortunately some of the budget restrictions due to COVID didn't allow that. And so we just focused on getting our cap back to a qualified status. The nice thing about that though, is we were able to incorporate a 2012 baseline, a much more recent snapshot of how Carlsbad was doing, and then also incorporate, very importantly, some of the new state and regional guidance. The state would be the California Air Resources Board scoping plan from 2017. I talked about how to calculate targets and such. And the regional guidance is also, once again, that SANDAG recap or regional climate action planning framework. If you haven't looked at that, or if you have anybody that's interested in learning more about what climate action plans contain and what they do and how they get calculated, I would offer SANDAG's recap as a wonderful resource to dig into. It has technical appendices and you can get as far into the weeds as you like. So with that new guidance, we calculated new forecasts and then reduction targets. And then we added clean electricity as a measure, which is essentially using the initial estimates of the feasibility study as far as energy reduction or GHG reductions. We were able to meet our targets once again in 2020 and 2035. It's interesting though when you start adding these measures have interactions. So in other words, if you clean up the grid, well then your GHG reductions for having distributed generation like PV go down because you're comparing it to a cleaner grid. But on the flip side, if you clean up the grid, then your reductions due to electric vehicle chargings go up because you're getting that much cleaner electricity into the cars. So we just in our last budget cycle, we approved some money for a comprehensive cap update. We've already received all the proposals. We're hoping to select a consultant, gosh, by the beginning of October or so and get them on board. So hopefully we will be beginning this year and the new cap administrator will be handed a comprehensive cap update as their first thing to do, which is nice because then they'll be able to take the cap all the way from soup to nuts, just from its inception. They'll be able to interact with the public, talk about the new measures, and then go out and implement those measures. So next slide, please. So here is, and I guess because we're doing a comprehensive cap update, all of this is probably going to change pretty soon. But I at least want to give you a picture of where we are right now. Our 2012 baseline inventory was 977 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. Similar proportions as far as the pie chart goes, transportation just above 50%. And that's both on-road and off-road transportation combined in there. Electricity and natural gas combined about 40, a little over 44, and then solid waste and water and wastewater picking up in relatively smaller percentages. Based on the CARB scoping plan, our 2020 goal was 4% below that number, so 939, and we did in our recent projections and inventories look like we're going to make that. As you can tell, the inventories may oscillate up and down a little bit, but we're certainly on track to. Our current emissions in 2018 are below that. And then the more aggressive reduction target is 52% by 2035. Okay. Next slide, please. Thanks. So our current reduction strategy areas are very similar. We've got electricity and natural gas. So as far as electricity, that includes energy efficiency as well as renewable energy. Natural gas would be energy efficiency. We don't currently have any decarbonization measures, but I know that's something that's going to come up in our comprehensive cap update. As far as transportation, we take two tacks at it. One of them is to reduce vehicle emissions. So that's trying to increase the zero emission vehicles proportion of the fleet that's out driving around on the roads.
Sounds like somebody's here. Oh, no growling this time. That's nice.
No, he's not in his cage.
Not in this cage. Yeah.
All right, buddy.
Hey, hello. Hello.
Let's get you some more.
Hello.
Somebody's got their mic on. Could they please mute it so we could hear the speaker? I'm not sure who that is.
No, it was nice. That's the time of this Zoom and COVID calls, right? We get to see and hear everyone's fellow pets. So the vehicle miles traveled is reducing overall trips. We're probably not going to get to 100% electric fleet in any time too soon. So we just want to reduce the overall VMT. And I want to touch on a little bit here. A lot of these GHG reduction measures, people look at it from purely just a GHG reduction measure, but so many of them have so many sustainability co-benefits. And vehicle miles traveled is obviously one of those. If we reduce the number of miles traveled, we're getting tighter knit neighborhoods, we're reducing congestion, and we're maybe even reducing the need for a lot of investment into transportation infrastructure. And then we also have water conservation, and then public outreach and engagement is a strategy area, and I'll talk about that a little bit on our last slide. So next slide, please. So here are inventories. We did the 2012 and the 2014. We did that on our own using, once again, USD's Energy Policy Initiative Center. And then the 2016 and 2018, I think, were available through the SANDAG efforts. We had a little bit of increase. The 2012-2014 predated our CAP implementation. Like I said, we were adopted in late 2015. We started in the beginning of fiscal year 16-17. So the 16 and 18 numbers which are right around 930,000 metric tons equivalent. It's very interesting when we see our 2020 to see if we can really see some progress based on the CAP implementation, the building codes, and other kinds of things. Next slide, please. Okay, so here are key measures, just the three real key measures. These are the ones that make up the vast majority of our anticipated GHG reductions in 2035. First is clean electricity. And so that's basically saying increasing the proportion of clean electricity in the community energy consumption. That has in it basically continue our participation in the Clean Energy Alliance. So we'll be monitoring, how that's moving along and what packages people are going for. But we also have an important measure in that is that if we're not getting to those goals that were established in the feasibility study, then we will explore the purchase of renewable energy credits to make sure we get to that. So that's kind of our fail-safe in case we're not reaching our goal. Zero emissions vehicle travels, it's essentially promoting the increase in travel, and we're taking the tact of trying to make it easier for folks to get over that fear perhaps of getting an EV and not being able to charge. So taking a look at charging infrastructure where we can fill in the gaps, and then also converting the city's fleet. And then energy efficiency retrofits are still, according to our last calculations, when you add up single and multifamily and commercial industrial retrofits, those still have a relatively significant reduction for 2035. What I don't have on here, because it's embedded in all of the measures that we have in the CAP, is the public outreach and education. And both Dan and Clem were speaking to where CEA could help out with the CAP implementation. That's a huge one. We can provide regulations, and then that might discourage people from doing something. We could provide infrastructure, but unless they may not want to use it. We can put multimodal streets everywhere. We can put EV charging infrastructure everywhere. But unless people are willing to make that behavior change and actually take that upon themselves, and I think a previous speaker was talking about the IPCC report and how that hopefully is putting feet under people's fire, both from the public standpoint and the policymakers. Until that happens, that's a lot of this is still swimming upstream. So I would say if we had a public outreach and education, I think for the future CAP, that would be good to have that as a separate measure. So it isn't embedded in all of these other measures. It's actually something that rises to that level. So I believe that's all I had. So,
all right, thank you, Mike. And let's see if we have some questions for you. I suspect we do. Paige? Paige, you're still muted.
Okay.
There
Hi,
you
Mike.
go.
I won't ask Mike too many technical questions. I've talked to him a lot, but I'm curious about this outreach aspect that you just mentioned because it was on my list of things to ask you. I know we have like a 7% opt-out rate with CEA, and I think it would be worthwhile for the individual cities, not just CEA, to be promoting this with their residents because whatever. I just think it's not necessarily just a CEA issue. It's the individual cities need to be doing a better job as well. So that was my question.
Sure, absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree because if we're going to be relying on CEA to reach our climate action plan reduction goals, we should be encouraging folks to do that. When I was referring to the public outreach and education, I was actually thinking of something slightly more global. Whereas when CEA talks about issues of climate change and hey, you too can make a difference, and there's other kinds of things, as programs that you have develop, being a true partner in that outreach, and maybe you have ways to reach people that we may not have. So that's more of what I was speaking of. Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay, Deborah?
So Mike, are you thinking like, for instance, CEA in their, media, social media, getting their outreach, they're actually looking and targeting all of the programs that all of our member cities have getting information out there about the benefits of that, other than just the Clean Energy Alliance, but really sort of getting information out there about transportation, vehicles, all the other pieces and parts that all our cities had presented today.
I think that would be, once again, I can't speak for what your recommendations or what the board's goals would be, but if we want to have a mutual support, I think that's a wonderful opportunity to have it there. And then we've also spoken about grid resiliency, and so as we start looking at electrifying more and more of the fleet, that's going to be a very important factor. So that gets to programs such as battery storage, demand response, and other kinds of things.
Yeah, let's us as an advisory committee kind of put a marker on that concept. I think it's one of the areas that we can help is figure out how in our communities to do effective public outreach so people take advantage of the kinds of things that are offered. Maybe that's a future agenda topic for us. Any other questions? If not, Mike, I have one for you. You're the only one with a city that has a qualified plan, and the rest of us who are a little bit nervous about that, tell us, what are the benefits? What are the downsides? What's been your experience? Do you have advice for us? Should we go that way?
Well, I can appreciate the concern about risk, and having an aspirational one. If the policymakers are truly aspirational, then effectively it's the same because you're still pushing to have all those measures implemented. With regard to development processing, I know that it was easier for our planners to start looking at CEQA documentation because we were hiring consultants to do peer review of the submitted GHG reduction analysis, and everyone was using slightly different methodologies or different assumptions and such. It reminded me back in my planning days when the Wild West of traffic studies came around, and all of a sudden adding this huge development would improve traffic. So being able to show that you're following along with your CAP as a developer, I think and that's also for public development as well, is a benefit. We were lucky in that we included those reach codes though. And so once you include the reach codes and you could show the numbers that mere compliance of those reach codes is going to offset what you think's new development's proportion, fair portion of the GHG reductions that need to happen, then that makes the processing and the CEQA documentation a lot easier. You just have to conform to those codes. It's just a matter of, and that's always a challenge, right? How much of the reduction are you going to put on new development or redevelopment versus existing development and existing activities?
Thank you for that, Mike. And related to that, I noted your percentage of natural gas use seems higher than in the other cities. And I'm curious why. Is that because you have a more substantial industrial community that is using natural gas? Is the Poseidon facility using natural gas?
Right. Actually, I lumped those together. I lumped electricity and natural gas together. So our natural gas is 13, in our 2012 inventory, it was 13.7%, and then our electricity was 30.8.
Okay.
So I just put for the discussion of sectors, I just put those two in there. But the natural gas consumed by the power plant though is not part of our inventory. So because that generates electricity, that's put into the emissions factor of that electrical generation, and then whatever site consumes that electricity, you take that emissions factor and attribute GHG emissions to however many kilowatt hours they consume, if that makes sense. It contributes to our local air pollution, but it's kind of like double dipping. If you wanted to take a census, you wouldn't take a census of the new births in a hospital and then go out in the community and see who has new persons in the household.
Right. No, that's good. That helps me understand. All right. Thanks to all of our speakers. Let's give a final chance. Anybody have any remaining questions? We've got a few minutes left, I think, before we have to wrap up. Or Barbara, do you have anything you'd like us to cover?
Yes, I see Paige has her hand up, so let her speak.
Paige.
I just want to thank Mike for his years of experience, and we're going to miss his expertise and his institutional knowledge. I must tell you that. So thanks, Mike, for all your hard work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we all agree with that.
Yeah. And before Clem, Mike, and Dan leave, I have a couple of things that I want to share. And one is thank you, all three of you, very much for taking your time out to make these presentations and help us to understand your goals and how let us start thinking about how we can help you achieve your goals. We do have, while CEA has limited funds to put towards programs and we're just getting off the ground, we actually have a couple of things that we're working on that are at no cost to CEA and at no cost to the customer. One is we're looking at a partnership with Ohm Connect, and Ohm Connect has a mission of getting 1 million smart thermostats into homes throughout the state to provide grid reliability, but also to put tools in customers' hands to be able to manage their electricity and energy efficiency. And so we are looking at establishing a marketing partnership to help them get their thermostats out and start helping with managing and grid reliability. We also have an RFP that we just released seeking interested parties to assist us with a battery storage program for our commercial and municipal accounts. We just put it out on the streets last week. And we're looking to see if we have anyone out there interested at no cost to CEA to look at our customer base and help us to identify those commercial and municipal accounts and locations that would be good to put battery storage. And the battery storage would belong to CEA, but we would then negotiate an agreement with that location and that commercial user for the benefit of that electricity. It can be partnered with a existing solar facility, or could go with a new solar facility. And we would give them the benefit of the electricity at a good rate. And we would have the use and dispatchable resources for grid reliability and to help us with reducing our peak loads. So we have that out there on the streets to see what we get back. I do know there is a CCA group of CCAs in the middle in LA County that have done this, and they had responses from the community and out there interested in saying, yeah, we'll help you at no charge. And at some point they do get paid, but they'll help us with the initial footwork. And I did notice that there's, a very common theme is the transportation. And that got me thinking as well, why don't we try and put an RFP out there to say, hey, is there anyone out there willing to kind of assess where we're at collectively, right, for the territory wide in terms of EV charging? Where's our need? And then help us to identify grants or opportunities to help us with expanding the infrastructure where we need it. So just a couple of initial thoughts there, but very much appreciate your time in putting together the presentations and then being here with us today.
Thank you, Barbara. And I think we're about to wrap up, but let's take a minute. Do we know when our next meeting is, Barbara?
Our next meeting will be in December. And I do want to, and if Clem and Mike and Dan, you're welcome to stay, but if you need to jump off, feel free. Our next meeting is in December, and that's our last meeting of this current work plan. And then the CEA board will be developing the schedule and the work plan for the Community Advisory Committee for the next calendar year. And my thought is, now that we've heard from the cities on their climate action plans and heard what their goals are and strategies, maybe what would be good for our next meeting is to bring back and have a discussion about, what types of initiatives or things should we be looking at for CEA for their next budget cycle, and come up with a list of priorities of what we would recommend that the board consider in their planning for the next fiscal year's budget, taking in mind what we've heard from the cities are in terms of, how their climate action plan goals, what their initiatives are. So that was the thought for the next meeting. And then also, maybe bring to them a recommendation or request for what our schedule might look like for the coming year. I know that this calendar year, we had meetings on a quarterly basis. Part of that was just reflection of where we are. We hadn't yet launched. Now we're launched. Now we're up and running. So be thinking about, maybe talk about as a group what we would like to ask of the board in terms of what the schedule might look like for the coming year. So.
Thank you, Barbara. Paige, you have a comment?
Yeah, two things. First of all, I've talked to my board member, Priya, about having this committee help develop their own work plan for next year. So that's something I'd like us to consider. And also, since we're supposed to be interacting with the community, our emails are not on the website. So it's pretty hard for people to get a hold of us, and it's pretty hard for us to get a hold of each other. So I'm just wondering if those could be posted on the website.
I think they could. There's restrictions on us communicating with each other under the Brown Act, but certainly citizens in your community should have access to your email. And I think Barbara's suggestions about an agenda for us are perfect. That's what I was thinking. It's time for us to get our heads together on what do we think are some of the programs that CEA should pursue. We should have a hand in developing a work plan for ourselves, but recognizing that we don't get the final decision. It's a board decision what our work plan is, but we can certainly recommend to them what we think would be productive. So between now and the next meeting in December, anybody who has a brilliant idea, my suggestion is send it by email to Barbara. Don't send it to all of us for Brown Act reasons, and she can collect those, and then we can have an agenda item to discuss those ideas in December. Anything else, Barbara, we need to cover?
Now, thanks for the suggestion, Paige. I will reach out to each of you with regards to what email address you would like. We can have CEA email addresses developed for you. And the challenge would be making sure that you're actually able to access them and have them come into your inbox, but that's all manageable and doable. So I will reach out to each of you, and I think that's a great suggestion to put them on the website. So we will get that taken care of.
All right, Deborah, you have a hand up?
Just real quick, I'm assuming we follow Brown Act, so we will be in person, right? I just wanted to put that out there. Okay.
Well, a good question. And I think it's evolving right now. There's an emergency piece of legislation that would extend the exemption from meeting in person. And I don't think anybody knows. If somebody at Clem or anybody on this line knows the latest update, they can update us. But the governor's executive order is set to expire the end of this month. He hasn't indicated whether he would extend it, and I don't think he'll say either way, at least until after the recall. And it depends on whether he gets recalled or not, where we go. But there is this emergency piece of legislation that would take effect immediately if it's passed, that would allow, I think, combined opportunities to meet in person and remote. So we're in a bit of flux. And I don't think we can say with certainty what our next meeting in December will be, or even what the next CEA meeting will be in terms of whether it's forced to be in person or can still be remote. But I assume Barbara will let us know when she figures all that out.
And I guess my question is, would we follow each city's protocol in terms of, because I know on the school board, we're allowing remote access as well as live. And I mean, I'm assuming it would be similar to whatever the cities are doing. I mean, wherever we're
most likely we would follow whatever protocol CEA sets. And what I've heard from the cities is that combined meetings sound great, but they require a lot of infrastructure and equipment that's expensive, and cities don't want to do it. So we may find ourselves where some cities do that and some don't. But I think, Barbara, jump in if you think otherwise, but I think we would follow whatever our board of directors at CEA says would be the meeting protocols.
Yeah, so we would follow the Brown Act, whatever we're required to do. We do rely on each of the member agencies to host us for our in-person meetings. So we would definitely follow our member cities with regards to protocols for in-person meetings, should we be going back to in-person meetings. I think, Chair, you hit it right on the head that having a hybrid or a combination is a bit challenging. It can be confusing to the members on how they participate and that, but I have seen some agencies that have it and they seem to have worked those kinks out, but it really depends on, what the abilities are of our hosts. We appreciate the cities helping us out and rely on them for on their infrastructure and capabilities. So I'm glad that we have a little bit of time between our meetings. In terms of CEA board, we do rotate, and our meetings scheduled that's been adopted assumes a rotation. And even though we've been virtual, they're still virtually hosted, by each city. So we would go back to that rotation. We haven't established a protocol for the Community Advisory Committee in terms of where we would meet or if we would follow in those same process of moving around. I can say it's, while the cities have hosted us, I think there is a level of effort on their part. So we want to think about that in terms of, whether we ask them to host us, and we may need to determine what makes the most sense for the committee.
Yeah, just for clarity, everybody's probably figured this out, but the board, the community advisory members, if we don't get some extension of the executive order, will have to be in person. I was only talking about the ability of our public to, have other ways of access. But if we're required, we wouldn't have half of us in different modes of presentation. Okay, just for planning purposes, I just wanted to do that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for bringing it up. And the bottom line is we don't have a clear answer. We're either going to be meeting in person, or we're going to be accommodating hybrid meetings, or we're going to be doing meetings like we have been on Zoom, and adding to the complexity. We don't know what the physical location would be for us as an advisory committee if we have to meet in person. So I think this is all going to resolve in the next month or so before our December meeting, and we should have clarity well before then. Don't you think, Barbara?
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
Any final questions or comments, Barbara or anybody? If not, go ahead. I'm sorry. Somebody started.
I say thank you all for your patience in getting in this time, and glad to see you all.
Likewise. Thanks everybody for attending, and we'll see you in December, if not sooner, and we are officially adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.